Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mystery Red Reads. I am your host, Mystery Red, and this is my disclaimer. This beta reading concrete is at the author's request. This video is for learning purposes. Today we're looking at a piece of original fiction. We are looking at chapter 18th. We're looking at the 18th. I'm sorry. We're looking at chapter 18 with Ruth this time. In this particular story, we are looking at Recurring, formerly known as The Lake of Haunted Memories. I am keeping it titled The Lake of Haunted Memories for ease of people following the story, and the new title is noted in each video upload. And I have an entire playlist for Ladybugs 88, which you can follow along. You can go there and follow along all of my reads for Lake of Haunted Memories, as well as a couple of chapters I read of another piece that she has called Remains. And with that, we are going to dive right in here. Chapter 18, Ruth. As the canoe inched away from the shore, Ruth gazed down into the water, hoping to spot submerged vegetation flapping back and forth as she had at Sparkling Lake. But here she couldn't see the bottom, and they hadn't yet paddled far enough to have left the littoral zone. Okay, I'm going to note one thing. It's really tiny, but I'm just going to note it. I feel like all the other times, I'm almost tempted to open another. Hang on. I'm curious of something. It is. Okay, your formatting's different. I was like, I know it doesn't usually look like this. I just know it doesn't. And it does not. I'm not sure what you're using there. I know. See, like I write justify mine. I know I do a hanging indent on my first not the first paragraph, but the first line of each new paragraph is a hanging indent for mine, and then I write justify. I think I actually justify the whole text on both sides, but I'm not sure. I just noticed that when I started reading, I was like, that looks really different on this side. I'm just noticing it. Let's see. I'm actually going to start over because I was so distracted by that. It is not, it is just a brain thing. That is not me being petty. That is literally how my brain works. And if I don't acknowledge it, it will continue to trip me up and I will not be absorbed in the story. I'll be lost in the distraction. So with that, let me try this one more time. As the canoe inched away from the shore, Ruth gazed down into the water, hoping to spot submerged vegetation flapping back and forth, as she had at Sparkling Lake. But here she couldn't see the bottom, and they hadn't yet paddled far enough to have left the littoral zone, where light reached all the way down, and entered the deeper limnetic zone. She couldn't see anything below the surface, and dared not imagine what could be swimming around the canoe. Snakes? The thought shook her, and she nearly lost hold of the paddle. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. It all worked. I follow it. I know what happened. It worked. I read it fine. I almost tripped up and I got slow in a couple spots. But I like what the sentences say. I don't really think there's anything to suggest changing about them. I think if I was reading silently, I'd be fine. I know that I tripped up here and I immediately knew why, and that's not it is not something to correct. It's not necessarily. I mean, it's just, I'm just going to note it that I tripped up and I want to know why I tripped up. And here for me, it was the tongue twister. I got tongue tied here. Paddled far enough to have left the literal zone. Left literal. Okay, we got it. We're good. Okay. And then I'm contemplating on a side note. She couldn't see anything below the surface and dared not imagine what could be swimming around the canoe. Snakes. And we know that she has a fear of snakes because she dropped out of the entire veterinary course because she couldn't handle a snake. So we know that. So that makes sense. The thought shook her and she nearly lost hold of the paddle. So I like the line. I like what it says. But I am having a sub-thought, and I don't quite know the solution, but I'm going to identify what I'm thinking first and take it one step at a time. When I read these last two lines, I'm like, oh, I know I know what's happening. I'm giving you a reader response. I know what's happening. She's worried about, I understand. I know why she has the fear of snakes. I mean, actually, we don't know why she has that fear, but we know that she has that fear from her experience in the veterinary program that she dropped out of. We know that is the reason she dropped out. She couldn't overcome it. And so it is logical that, with her being out in the middle of the wilderness here in this lake, that she can't see beneath the water, and she's just in like a little canoe. That's not much, and it makes sense that she'd be worried about whether or not there'd be snakes down there. All that said, I'm not suggesting this is a change. I'm just going to give a reader response, okay? And you take it for what you will. Just food for thought, okay? As I was reading it, I saw snakes. I had the memory, so it brought up the memory for me. And I knew that Anna was scared. So I know that she's scared. We're going to keep reading. I'm going to say that as a reader, I know she's scared, but I don't feel her fear. That's what I'm noting. Okay, I know she's scared, but I do not feel her fear. That might be a couple of reasons for that, because the writing is clean. So a couple of reasons I might not feel her fear is because I'm not afraid of snakes. And so I kind of can't take her. I don't want to be rude to Ruth, but I don't, I guess I personally am not afraid of snakes. Therefore, I'm not going to feel that fear, if that makes sense. That's probably the nicest way I could say it without being a jerk to Ruth, because I do respect other people's fears. I respect Ruth's fear, but it is not my own. And so I'm disconnected from that fear. There we go. That is the reader processing of that. Okay, we're gonna move on. Something blocked the light from penetrating the water column, presumably suspended particles. Were the same particles also responsible for resisting their efforts, as though they traveled in molasses instead? If paddling in a limpid lake had challenged her in the current one, the effort was agonizing. Each time the blade emerged from the surface, it splashed and drenched her sleeves, which it had on Sparkling Lake. But here the revolting stench sickened her and impregnated her clothes. And why was the water so cold? Ironically, her initial impression of the lake couldn't have been more incorrect. Instead of burning and boiling her alive, the lake was threatening to freeze her. If she stayed in this program, she would have plenty of fieldwork ahead of her, and she couldn't face Okay, my brain is literally connecting. It's merging face and similar. That is not you all. I have to try this again. If she stayed in this program, she would have plenty of fieldwork ahead of her, and she couldn't face similar conditions again. Are all unnamed lakes like this? She asked, hoping for a negative answer. Not usually, Carl replied from behind Ruth. The ones I've seen before were a miniature version of Sparkling Lake. Wow, we really lucked out with this one. Ruth couldn't deny Sparkling Lake had been a joyful place, teeming with life. Aside from her struggles with paddling, she'd mainly worried about keeping her hands away from the scaly creatures like the one that had brushed her hand and reminded her of the vet school snake. That's a bit of a long sentence. It's a little bit long, and we have hand twice. Now, I'm going to go back one and observe the other echo here, but I accepted it because of the text. Let's just go back and say that I acknowledged that I did see it, and then we're going to move down and talk about this line a little bit. Okay. And here it is. Okay, so up here, and maybe I'll just highlight it just for you to see, even though it's not necessarily indicating that you should change anything, because it read fine, and in the text, the context that it's in, it was also fine. But it is a word echo. They are very close to each other, like literally one line and then the next line. Sometimes the use is okay. I feel like it's a personal opinion. I don't have one about this. I'm impartial because it worked when I read it. But if, whatever, I'm going to note it. I observed it. We're going to move on from it, and we're going to get back down here to this line, and we're going to take a look at it. So this line is kind of long, and we have hands in here in the same sentence more than one time, which I kind of shy away from. So let's go ahead and look at that and see what we think. Aside from her struggles with paddling, she'd mainly worried about keeping her hands away from scaly creatures like the one that had brushed against her hand and reminded her of the vet school snake. Okay, so I'm guessing that happened in the other lake. So she doesn't want a repeat of that. This is what I think. I think you should omit, this is my suggestion. I'd omit all that. Oops. Oh, I'm not in suggesting. Oh my goodness. Hang on. Let's go back and change that really quick. There we go. There you go. Now, the reason let's break down why I'm making that suggestion. Aside from her struggles with paddling, she'd mainly worried about keeping her hands away from scaly creatures, period. Okay? Like the one that had brushed against her hand and reminded her of the vet school snake. We already know she's scared of snakes. Maybe you're trying to remind the reader of the vet experience, but we've already talked about the snake up there, and I remembered the snake incident from the vet school. So I'm giving the reader the benefit of the doubt and saying we don't need to repeat it. And then, like the one that had brushed against her hand, I feel like I just don't think we need it, because basically we know if she's scared of snakes, she's probably scared of scaly creatures, all encompassing, and I accept it. So it also shortens the sentence and it'll read smoother. Let me just try it, and I'm going to move right on down here and see what you think. And you'll have heard it both ways because I read it the other way originally. Wow, we really lucked out with this one. Ruth couldn't deny Sparkling Lake had been a joyful place, teeming with life. Aside from her struggles with paddling, she'd mainly worried about keeping her hands away from scaly creatures. But here, she couldn't bear the mere water. She couldn't bear the mere water. Did the overcast sky help lower the water temperature? Mere water? Okay. This line is not working for me, and I'm not entirely sure why. I thought maybe it's the word, it might still be the word mirror. I'm not sure why. So I looked it up to make sure that there's not some definition I don't know about, because that is completely possible. If anyone is ever privy to my reads with Alternative P, they have a fantastic vocabulary, and I am frequently looking things up and feeling silly, okay? But I looked it up, and it is what I thought it is, and so I'm still confused, I guess. I was thinking I'd look it up, find another definition, and then all of a sudden it would be clear to me, but it is what I thought, and so I still don't get it. Mere, that is solely or no more or better than what is specified. The merest hint of makeup. So it's to me, it's like it's trivial. Okay, it's minimal. But here she couldn't bear the mere water. So basically, here is she saying that here she cannot even tolerate the water itself? Like, she thought she'd enjoy it because she kind of enjoyed Sparkling Lake as a joyful place teeming with life, and here she can't even tolerate the water. Is that what she's saying? I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to say notes and video, and I think that she's saying she can't bear even the water. Like, she can't even tolerate the water. That's what I think she's saying, but I'm not entirely sure. So we may want to rearrange and make it clearer. And you probably think, oh, that's pretty clear, because you write very clear. So I'm frustrated with myself for not getting it. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Did the overcast sky help lower the water temperature? Did it contribute to make the lake so gloomy? Did it contribute to making the lake so gloomy? That is going to be my suggestion. Although I wouldn't make it look like that. Like, if I'm marking it up, it wouldn't have the strike through the whole word. I would just take off the E and add ing. But whatever, it did it for me. We're going to accept it. Did it contribute to making the lake so gloomy? Past the equipment box, Anna had propped her hands on her knees, palms facing upward. The bandages now tinged red. Oh my gosh, they're like bleeding through her. Oh my goodness. I'm creeped out by the whole hand thing. Bringing her in the canoe had been unwise at best. Ruth should have refused. She could do nothing to help Anna now, but she hoped at least she wasn't in pain. Too bad they hadn't brought the bottle of ibuprofen. I think we're far enough from the shore, Barb shouted from the bow. Go ahead and anchor. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I just can't. Okay, so this creepy lake with the creepy trees, with the creepy fruit, with the creepy grass, with the injury to Anna's hands. The truck has been wrecked. They put a spare on it. It does run. And now here they're getting ready to go. They're out on this water in this muddy lake with the freezing water, and the whole thing is gloomy, and it's just not sitting right with Ruth, and I can totally get that. And now we're going to drop an anchor into the water of the place, and they half of them don't even know where they're at, and the other one is just so arrogant. She just thinks that she's going to do wonderful things with the information she gathers at this crazy place where terrible things happen, because she doesn't believe them anyway. Oh my goodness. And now I have just summarized the story up to this point. And I'm just kind of cringing because one thing I do cringe at, see, like I didn't cringe at snakes. One thing I do cringe at is not being able to see what is beneath my feet. Or in case of boat, what's beneath my boat, especially one like a kayak or a canoe where there is not much between you and the water. And you're not even that high up. You're like pretty much sitting in it. I'm a little worried. Okay. What's going to happen, if anything? Because that was not even an ominous line, but I'm a little squirmy. It's an interesting observation that when writing, we can tap into a person's personal fears, and it could be something that's not, like the snakes, and now here's mine popping up. I'm actually not squirrely about the snake idea in the water. I'm squirrely about, and that's coming from somebody who's accidentally been inner tubing with a water moccasin. But that's another thing. So you'd think I'd be more scared, but basically I'm more scared of, I don't know what it is. We don't know what's down there. I can't see what's in the water with me. That's what creeps me out. Okay. So we get to tap into these little fears of people and make them squirm before we've even actually done anything at all, which is kind of awesome. Okay. I see. All right. Ruth brought her paddle across the top of the canoe as Carl had showed her at Sparkling Lake, and watched as the anchor plopped and disappeared underwater. Against the hull, the black cable hissed, a sound that caused her to recoil. Oh, I know that sound well. And the clunk clunk as it kind of bangs against stuff and then it hits out. Sinking into the glump of it sinking into the water. Actually, I like that sound. She redirected her gaze toward the shore. Observed from the water, the woods appeared strangely homogeneous. Homogeneous. We're going to try this paragraph again. I'm a little bit, this first part here started me off kind of awkwardly. I observed from the water, and I was like, observe from the water. Oh, because they're in the boat. So afterthought, I could be a little bit slow today. Apologies if that is the case, but I'm going to read through one more time. She redirected her gaze toward the shore. Observed from the water, the woods appeared strangely homogeneous, like a photograph edited by copying and pasting the same clump of trees over and over around the lake. Even cloned organisms escaped being identical, but these plants somehow were. Their wing-shaped leaves flapped in the wind, hinting at bats that tried but failed to take flight, trapped somehow. Ruth, since Anna can't work, would you mind collecting the water samples? Her back to Ruth, Barb spoke over her shoulder, head turned sideways, sunglasses on. Okay, I'm pausing. So this line is it's not super long, but we have detail additions that I don't need. And so I actually did not want. I get that you're trying to slip a visual in there, but there's already her back to Ruth. Barb spoke over her shoulder. I'd end it there. How her head is turned unless something's going to happen next that these two details, her head being turned sideways and her sunglasses on, unless those two things are going to be related to, if they're not going to be relevant in what happens next, okay? If they're not, let them go. If they are, we're going to keep them, and then we'll go back and look at how we might, I don't know. I still don't, even if we decided to keep them, if they become relevant, I kind of don't want them here. I feel like we're trying to get too much into one sentence. That's the easy way of putting it. All right, so let's keep going. Ruth, since Anna can't work, would you mind collecting the water samples? Her back to Ruth, Barb spoke over her shoulder. Don't worry about the filtration. As long as you label the bottles with the depth they come from, we can store them in the cooler and process them later in the lab. Sure, Ruth had read the chapters on sampling and remembered the steps, all simple enough to repeat. Lifting the lid on the equipment box, she retrieved the Van Dorn sampler and the plastic bag with empty bottles. She laid them by her feet along the bottom while she slipped on a pair of nitrile gloves. Weird, Carl said from the stern. The rope's all out, but the anchor didn't catch. Bring it back in and try again. Barb turned her head. Okay, you've got an echo on again. I would omit it. And because I was suggested you omitted the first turning of her head anyway, so you won't be missing anything, and you don't have to change anything. And actually, you're slipping in a head turn here, so you kind of gave one up, and you got one here, and you're still getting one. So I'm gonna take it from here, and we're gonna go on through. Bring it back in and try again. Barb turned her head. And Ruth, pass me the sonde, will you? While the anchor sounds played, Ruth fetched the cell phone-sized handheld digital display. Oh my goodness. While the anchor sound replayed, Ruth fetched the cell phone-sized handheld digital display. Attached, the black-coated cable was bundled into a coil and secured with a twist-tie strap. Seeing and holding it caused her a level of unease she couldn't explain. As absurd as that sounded, even to herself, did her mind associate the coiled position? Okay, wait, is she asking herself this part? As absurd as that sounded, even to herself, she wondered, I think maybe she wondered if, there we go. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to read it the way you have it, and then I'm going to read it with the suggested change so you can make a decision. As absurd as that sounded, even to herself, did her mind associate the coiled position and shiny coating with a snake? And then I'm suggesting, as absurd as that sounded, even to herself, she wondered if the coiled position and shiny coating with... Okay, so I get it. So you've got the associated thing. This is the part that's not working for me, is the did her mind. Okay. Oh, I know why. Okay, so it sounds like you're asking a question from this part on, but the first part doesn't seem like you're going to be asking a question. And so it seemed out of context. It didn't seem to fit. I guess the placement of it didn't seem to fit. With a little bit of rewording, it should work. Now, so my version didn't work either, but that's because we needed the association to finish the sentence. Maybe in lieu of did. I think in lieu of the word did. So let me try this. Let me see if I can delete the comment. And then instead of highlighting the whole entire thing, oh, I don't want to highlight it at all. Actually, I want to just add a comment to that one word. There we go. All right. Here we go. Now let's try it one more time. As absurd as that sounded even to herself, she wondered if her mind associated the coiled position and shiny coating with a snake. Okay, there we go. That one made more sense to me. This one was like I started with here and I was expecting the sentence to go somewhere else, and then it went into a question and I was a little taken aback. Yeah, we're going to go with that. At Sparkling Lake, Anna had distributed the equipment, and it was a pity she couldn't do it again here. Ruth nearly asked her to pass the sonde parts to Barb, but she didn't want to aggravate Anna's injuries and instead reached forward and did it herself. The canoe rocked in reaction to her slightest movement. Oh my goodness. Nope. No. I don't like the boat rocking. Nope, don't rock the boat. Don't want to go into the muddy, cold water. Nope, I gotta finish reading. Nope. Okay. I want to see if Ruth also squirms at this. No. Don't want to go into the muddy water. Please tell me they're not going to fall into this muddy water. And please tell me nothing's going to grab them from up out of the water. Okay. Ruth nearly asked her to pass the sonde parts to Barb, but she didn't want to aggravate Anna's injuries and instead reached forward and did it herself. The canoe rocked in reaction to her slightest movement, and she felt as a spider would if it had to carry items while it crawled, except a spider had 8 arms and she had 2. Barb ran 1 foot over the bow seat to straddle it and turned sideways to accept the items. The actual sonde comes separate. Is it pronounced sonde or sonde? I think it's sonde. I know, I just don't have enough arms, Ruth said, again thinking of a spider. Crawling backward proved even more challenging than forward, since it required the ability to move where she couldn't see, and the unknown had always frightened her the most. She lost her balance and panicked, terrified about falling in the lake. Girl, me too. I'm terrified you're going to fall in the lake. The last thing she needed was to soak in that foul water, the mere thought making her skin crawl. In time, she gripped the edges of the hole and steadied herself, thankful her hands were empty and she hadn't dropped anything. Okay, yes, the water is foul, but girl, you don't know what's in it. You don't know what's in it. And I know you're already worried, but I'm worried, like worried +1, because you don't know what's in that. You don't know what's in that. I mean, look, even if it's not a psychological thriller, even if I wasn't reading this genre, I'd still be squirming because it's muddy water and you can't see what's in there. It could be a body in there, okay? There could be a body floating around in there. It's true. That could be real. That could really happen. And I've always thought that. Always, always, always. I'm like, I don't want to swim in places where I can't see what's in the water with me because, you know, in the ocean you got sharks, and in ponds you've got like snapping turtles, and you've got snakes, and I'm not scared of snakes, but I really don't want them I don't want to swim with them. Nope. I like where I can get away from them, like where I can observe them from a distance. Or if they're in captivity, I can hold them. I'm not worried about that. But I just don't want things on my feet that I can't see. I'll give you an example. I rescued a turtle off the side of the road once, and I was driving home, and he crawled. I had him in the back seat on the floorboard. He crawled from the floorboard in the back under the driver's seat and crawled up and onto my feet while I was driving the car. And I love turtles. I picked him right up and stuck him in the car, okay? But I was not cool with that. It is very weird when you're pushing pedals and have something crawl across your foot, okay? It's weird. Anyway, here we go. We're going to focus. Once her shaking subsided, did she start shaking? Okay, hang on. Let's back up. Do I see any trembling in here? Crawling backward proved even more challenging than forward, since it required the ability to move where she couldn't see, and the unknown had always frightened her the most. She lost her balance and panicked, terrified about falling in the lake. The last thing she needed was to soak in that foul water, the mere thought making her skin crawl. In time, she gripped the edges of the hole and steadied herself, thankful her hands were empty and she hadn't dropped anything. Once her shaking subsided, she again reached into the equipment box and took the rocket-like sonde, hugging it to her chest and praying she wouldn't bump it against anything. Since it cost upward of $10,000, damaging it would be her quickest way out of graduate school this time around. I'm gonna roll with this. For a second, I was a little bit taken aback that she was shaking, but I think my musing disrupted the flow of the story. So I'm just gonna roll with it. I think it worked for me the second time. Ruth wished for lake legs, and her normal breathing only resumed after she'd handed Barb the sonde. If the master's program didn't work out, she could always join the circus as a trapeze artist. The anchor still won't hold, Carl said, an irritated edge to her voice. Ruth, could you pass me the extra rope, too? Sure. Ruth perched over the equipment box and located the bundle of braided nylon fibers. Despite the gloves touching it caused her more discomfort than the sonde cable had. An image flashed across her mind of the hanging man from her nightmare as he reached for the rope around his neck. She blinked the memory away and turned sideways to hand Carl the rope. Before Ruth could refocus on her sampling task, Anna caught her attention, sitting in the same position as before. She was trembling. Are you cold? Ruth asked. The muscle heat from padding and moving about kept her warm, but otherwise she would be freezing, from a combination of the splashing cold water and the absence of sunshine. I'm good, Anna replied in a monotone voice. She didn't turn her head. Ruth didn't believe her. Are you sure? Never better. There's a lot to be said about understanding and forgiveness. What was Anna talking about? Her gaze fixed on the shore, she pointed. Can you see them? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. Girl with the weird hand injuries and the eyes that rolled back in the head and they were white at one point. And then she started kind of acting a little bit normal, but then saying loopy random things. And now she's seeing stuff. And I don't know. I gotta, nope. Okay. See what? Aside from water and sky, Ruth saw nothing but grass, the woods, and Carl's pickup truck. Anna grinned, a blissful expression on her face. They're beautiful creatures, gossamer, almost like clouds, but less cottony. They're so light they float. What are you describing? Ruth retrieved the sampling tube from the bottom of the canoe and opened both rubber seals. Have you ever seen those inflatable air dancers in used car lots with those long arms dangling at the sides and flapping in the wind? Anna waved her arms to imitate the movement, the blood-tinged bandages lending the scene a bizarre edge. Yes, Ruth said, more a question than an answer. Where was this conversation going? That's how they are shaped. They're gorgeous. Where did you see this? Ruth armed the closing mechanism and raised the sampler tube over the edge of the hull. Right there, Anna pointed toward the shore. Ruth squinted but saw nothing new. Are you seeing this now? Anna turned her head, her eyes sparkling and her lips partly open. Yes. Do you see it too? Ruth didn't, not wanting to disappoint Anna. She turned toward the opposite shore and scanned all around the lake, but nothing fit Anna's description. Only more batwing leaves atop elegant leg tree trunks continued to flap in a mock salute across the distance, as though they stood guard and watched the canoe. Ruth shivered and reminded herself of how silly her thoughts were. She busied herself with lowering the sampling tube, but continued to worry about Anna. Was she hallucinating? Could what she claimed to feel burrowing into her skin earlier have been chemicals that caused altered mind states? I'm with you, Ruth. I'm feeling that. They're floating, with big smiles on their faces, big like a slice of cantaloupe melon. Anna turned and grinned like a ventriloquist dummy. Ruth faced upward and scanned the clouds in the sky, then downward and the dark surface of the water, but she found nothing that resembled either a smile or a slice of melon. With no idea how to help Anna, Ruth focused on the sampling. The faster they finished their tasks, the sooner they could go back to shore and leave to get Anna some medical help. So Ruth watched as the marks increased on the metered cable as the sampling tube descended into the water. Despite the gloves, the icy water stung her hands, and the cable fibers chafed not only her palms but also her mood, bothering her as much as the anchor rope and the sound cable had. She wished she could swap tasks with someone else, but was too embarrassed to suggest it, in case anyone asked why. I think we may have paddled too far out too far. I think we may have paddled out too far, Carl said. The anchor isn't catching at all. Do we really need to anchor? Barb said. I don't think the results will change too much if the canoe veers a little. Well, okay then. Ruth, when you have a moment, could you pass me the Secchi disc? Secchi. Let me just bring this sample in. At 3 feet below the surface, the first sampling depth, Ruth released the messenger to close the tube. Take your time, Carl said. Ruth hauled the sampler upward, hand over hand, until it emerged from the water. She opened it, emptied the contents into a sampling bottle, and labeled it 3 feet with a black Sharpie pen. Then she placed the tube by her feet. Leaning over the equipment box, she took a minute to recover from a momentary dizzy spell and another to locate the Secchi disc. Like a flat frisbee, it had 2 white quarters that alternated with a tube painted black and a string that passed through a central opening. She swiveled her torso and handed Carl the disc. Thanks, Carl held it with both hands. Ruth picked the sampler up from the dark puddle it had created on the bottom of the canoe and returned it to the water. With the mechanism rearmed, she lowered it to 10 feet below the surface this time. Sorry to bug you again, Ruth, but could you come take a look at something when you get a chance? Carl asked. Sure, let me just bring the second sample in. Ruth released the messenger, retrieved the tube, and opened it. She filled another sample bottle, labeled it with 10 feet, and left the sampler in the growing puddle on the bottom. Then she threw her legs over the thwart that stretched across the canoe and faced Carl. Watch this. Using both hands, Carl lowered the metered string until the Secchi disc disappeared below the surface. This is where I no longer see it. The string showed 9 inches, and Ruth read the measurement aloud. Exactly. Carl pulled it upward until it reappeared about 4 inches below the surface. Since the Secchi depth was the average of the two measurements, this meant light didn't penetrate past 6 inches below the surface. Carl pleated her forehead. I've been studying lakes in northern Wisconsin since my honors thesis, and I've never seen such a low Secchi depth before. How much was it at Sparkling Lake? Ruth asked. About 25 feet. That's quite a difference. A huge one, and we can't be in a spot with high turbidity. It's not like there's a river emptying here or an eddy stirring up sediment into the water column. Carl collected the string until the disc rose out of the water. We're practically at the center of the lake and over deep water, so deep the anchor never reached the bottom. Ruth had no suggestion to offer, only a wistful smile. You've done it twice, so it has to be that. Carl shrugged. As strange as that is. Responding to the ominous feeling in her stomach, Ruth glanced at the shore and sensed movement around the pickup truck. She couldn't identify what it was, but something had changed. This was a mistake. Their being here in this canoe on this lake with Anna injured and unwell, all of this was a grave mistake. Ruth's stomach twitched and she ran a soothing hand over it. The voice inside her returned. Go. Leave. Get out. It's not too late yet. Are you feeling all right? Carl asked. I don't like this place. Unable to explain why, Ruth hoped Carl wouldn't ask, but Carl nodded and said, I don't like it either. Oh, and that was the end of that chapter. Oh my gosh, I wanted to keep going. I'm enjoying this. I don't know. I think that beta reader that just was discouraging. I just feel like this wasn't for them. This just wasn't the story for them, and that is entirely possible and entirely okay. Because I'm enjoying it, and I'm actually going to end this video and hop over and read the chapter 19. I think we're on chapter 19. Hopefully we can get my mouth to work right, because I mean, speaking is kind of the whole entire part of the process. But quit tripping over everything. All right, it's reading well for me. I'm following it along. I know what's happening. I understand it. You're doing a great job. I'm interested in what's going to happen next. I'm nervous that they're out on the water. I have recapped the whole story in this thing. So it's amazing how just the little subtle things that people are naturally afraid of work great for you in helping build up the parts of your story as well. So I don't know if you intentionally inserted things that were meant to be, that would make a person nervous, or could make a person nervous anyway. But it is definitely a bonus that they contribute to the overall unsettling factor at play here. So on that note, I'm going to end here and go over and start another video. And guys, I'll see you next time on Mystery Red Reads.